There's material. There's a gesture towards the object. A movement on the object. A motion with the material. There's a pause, a rotating gaze. Years of observing. Black holes into a minute. Final project, idiosyncratic. If I give it to you or you buy it from me, it doesn't make you a materialist. Materialism is an ugly word. Materials shaped by nimble and inspired hands. Hands that know and never know is beauty. There's movement, there's an object, there's material, there's a gesture.
Good morning, everyone. Today we are in the glass shop here at Peninsula High School. My name is Mr. Brayton. I'm the glass teacher, and we're going to be doing some sandcasting today. So part of the project that was assigned to you in Mr. Mead's class, making a stamp with your initials on it, we're going to have the opportunity today to push that into sand, creating negative space, and then we're going to fill that negative space with glass, creating a positive of the stamp you've made out of ceramics. So, if you've never been in the glass shop at Peninsula High, here is the furnace behind me, which keeps the glass molten at 2100 degrees. So we're going to be using a big ladle to scoop the glass out of the furnace and ladle it into the depressions that we make into the sand with your clay tiles. So, next we're going to go over to the marber over here, and we'll be pushing tiles into it. I'll explain things as we go, and then you'll get to see the process of actually pouring the glass into the molds. So, I'll say goodbye from here, walk over there, and we'll get on to the next step. Alright, so here we have a box of sand, and this is a special type of sand. The box is filled with an ovalene-based sand that has what's called bentonite in it, that keeps it all together, and you have to have a certain moisture so the sand stays together. Then this is on the top, there's a couple millimeters of what's called tetrabond, and this is a sand that's used primarily for casting metal, and it's an oil-based sand, so you can see it stays together really nice. And this is what's going to hold the image when we push it into the sand. So here we have a few different examples of tiles. These were two that were done previously that just have some nice designs in them. The assignment that you will be doing is your initials. And if you notice here, Mr. Mead did one with his initials going one way and one that's backwards. When we cast this in the glass, depending how you view the piece, that'll dictate whether your name is forward or backwards. So, taking these, we will now push these in the sand. So, pretty simple process. Just want to have nice, even pressure. Kind of come in and fill the sides a little bit. Give it a little wiggle. There we go. The image is now pushed into the sand. So we can do about 4, maybe 6 at a time, but we'll do these 5 for now. And this is the most important part. If you get a nice image in there, it'll cast really nice. If it's a little loose or some sand falls in there, your image won't be quite as pure. Oh yeah, that looks great. Okay, so now we'll do Mr. Mead's initials. nice edge on there. Then of course this little handle on the back is very important, so make sure that when you're doing these casts that you have a little bit on the end so we have something to grab onto while we're pulling it out. Now if you need to at this point you could get in there and touch things up. Everything looks pretty good, so we don't need to do too much. So now that one, do the other one. So this is the one that's backwards. And you have to make sure there's enough space so when you do the next one, you don't affect the one that you just pushed in. Let's cast. All right. So now comes the fun part, the casting of the glass. So we have our metal ladle here. Furnace is behind me at 2150 degrees. That's always the temperature it stays at. So essentially what I'm going to do is ladle molten glass, bring it over to our mold, and just dump it right in. Mr. Mead's going to be there to cut the little tail of glass if we need to. The glass will stay in the mold for 2 to 5 minutes, maybe a little quicker while the glass sets up. And then once it's hard enough that we can actually touch it, we'll take it out of the mold and put it into what's called an annealer, where it'll sit overnight and slowly cool down to take the stress out of the glass. So let's give it a shot. All right, we ready? If you want, you can just close it when we leave. That'd be great. Grab the shears. Oh, I just messed up your other one. So cut that little tail really low. Yeah. Sure, torch that? Yep. More? Yeah. Oh, let's get this other one there too. Look at it burn. So when I come out, I forgot it had that little tail on there, and I gave you a little. Yeah. So when I come out, just put that tail before I pour. Right there. Okay, let's go for it. There's a little glass on this seal. It's a little sticky. Get it? I'll pull it.
better on the
Yeah, that
factor?
one's really good.
Wow. That's not too bad at all.
Yeah, right? On the smoke.
What factor?
Pretty good.
Oh, that one came out nice right there. That
So
second
you
one.
can see this one's still really hot. The color on that one, it's starting to set up. You know, there's still at least 1300, 1400 degrees over here, and that one's still red hot, you can see. I hit the other mold and kind of messed it up, so we'll have to repress that one. So we'll do this one, and then we'll have to repress the other one. So now, as it's cooling down, we'll kind of get ready to start pulling those out. So what you do, you just kind of get under the sand here. So there it is on a wood paddle, and now this will go into the annealer. All right, so here's our last cast. All right, so this is the annealing oven. And essentially, it's sort of like a kiln that you would use in ceramics, but it serves the reverse purpose. A kiln, you put things in at room temperature, they come up to a certain temperature, which fires the clay, and then they cool down. This one is at 960 degrees right now. The glass goes in there hot, so you put all your pieces in there, and then it slowly cools down on a cycle, about 100 degrees an hour, till it's at room temperature, and that aligns all the molecules in the glass and takes the stress out of it. So everything will sit in here overnight, and then we'll pull the projects out tomorrow and see how they turned out. So we'll bring you back tomorrow and we'll see how our pieces turned out. See ya. All right, hello everyone, welcome back. So I have the examples of our cast glass. They're out of the annealer and they're cooled off now, so we can take a look at everything. So a couple things to think about as you're doing this assignment is, so this is our first example. This is the first one we did, and this one turned out really nice. The way that we're viewing most of them is through the lens of the glass because it gives it a nice optical quality. It kind of magnifies the image really nicely. So when you're doing your initials, so our second one, the harp, so when you're thinking about how you want to lay these out, you really want to think about, specifically with your initials, in this design, even though the harp came out opposite of the impression, it doesn't really matter if it's forward or backward on this one. When you're doing your initials, you really have to think about how you're setting it up for it to look through the glass. So this one here, Mr. Mead did this one backwards. And when you look through the glass, everything turns out perfect. James Mead, forward. So on this one, where it looks regular on the tile, when you look through the window, it's backwards. So when you look at it this way, it looks fine. So you have to think about how you want to view your piece when it's done. I would recommend doing it backwards. So when your tile's finished, everything looks good. So just a couple considerations. Also, the dots, as we pushed those in, some of them didn't some of them actually got caught in here, so when we lifted the tile out, it pulled the dots out with it. So I think on your first one, maybe don't get too detailed on the background. Just kind of stick with your initials. You could put a little texture on the initials themselves, but I wouldn't overdo it with texture because we're probably going to lose a little bit of that when we cast it. So yeah, if there's any further questions, you can refer to Mr. Mead and let them know if you have any questions or concerns. But I would say initials are a good thing to start with. Once again, I recommend doing it backwards on the tile, so then when you push it in the sand and display it this way, everything is the correct way. So we'll be doing more of these probably later in the year. If anyone has some ideas too that they want to expand on, you could let us know and we'll let you know if it'd be possible to do it or not. So that kind of completes our casting assignment. You'll be getting these back with your ceramic stamps all at the same time, and look forward to seeing you for the next installment of Glass USA.
There's material, there's a gesture towards the object, a movement on the object, a motion with the material. There's a pause, a rotating gaze, years of observing black holes into a minute. The final product, idiosyncratic, does not make you a materialist. If I give it to you, or you buy it from me, it does not make you a materialist. Materialism is an ugly word. Materials shaped by nimble and inspired hands, hands that know and never know is beauty, beauty.